This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we have what might be the least talked, well, not least, obviously, some people are talking about on the news, but what might be the most understated news story of the last week, that Ford is dealing with a unionization problem at the Blue Oval Battery Plant in Kentucky. This could potentially cost Beshear his presidency. This could potentially lead to great backlash against sitting Republican legislators. This could potentially cost Kentucky taxpayers hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. We'll go into that. Also, school choice failed. The amendment failed. We're starting to get a few comments from different legislators and people on it. We have a comment from Damon Thayer saying he wishes the GOP would have done more. You and me both, buddy. You and me both. We'll go into why Damon Thayer, though, happens to say that and what the truth of his statement is. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, please make sure you leave a review for the podcast. Make sure you are telling others to tune in. Today, we got 2 episodes in. Next week, we're hoping to get more episodes done. We're still bringing you more information, more commentary on Kentucky politics, Kentucky news stories than any other podcast out there. Even only doing it 2, 3, 4 times a week, we're still bringing you that news. And we hope to bring you even more as we're gearing up to go into our next legislative session. It will be interesting to see what our legislators do to go ahead and make a difference in Kentucky. Will they keep their losing streak alive? Will they keep their mamby-pamby liberals with an R next to their name streak going? Or will they recognize and make a difference? We had quite a lot of things happen during this year's election season, especially during the primaries, that could have sent a clear message that it's time to get off the pot. It's time to get to work, getting some conservative things done in Kentucky. Moving to, though, this electric vehicle battery plant story. So the UAW says they have a super majority of workers at the upcoming battery plant. I don't even think it's fully open. In fact, I know it's not fully open, but the workers that they're hiring, that they're training, that they're getting ready to go, they say they have a super majority signed on to unionize that plant. And we have this story from WDRB. I want you to take a listen to this news story. Because it's telling. You know what a problem it is when they get around to talking about Beshear and this issue. And this is a big story. I mean, the fact that Beshear wouldn't have an opinion on it is pretty crazy to me because obviously, for those of you who are unaware, the Kentucky taxpayer gave this project in just like cash money handouts alone, $410 million. Not to mention all the additional monies we've sunk into things like the infrastructure in the area. Local governments have sunk in. The tax incentives, tax giveaways that we've done. Not to mention the hundreds of millions we've dumped into incentivizing, supporting factories and businesses to supply things to this. The taxpayer probably has spent close to $1 billion at this point into this project and promised to this project, and it's all going up in smoke. It was a bad investment from the start. Those of you who listen to the show know I said it was a bad investment. But let's listen to this WDRB story and see if you can pick out what a red alarm fire this is for the development. Let's take a listen to that.
Employees at the upcoming Hardin County EV battery plant are working to unionize. United Auto Workers says a supermajority of Blue Oval SK employees have signed union authorization cards. Today, they launched a campaign to join the UAW. Back in August, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said Blue Oval workers would not be part of a union. Right now, they are not. At the time, Beshear said that was because of an agreement between Ford and the UAW as part of that new contract workers signed. He said the agreement gave better wages and benefits to the 10,000 other workers at Kentucky's other Ford plants. For comparison, Blue Oval SK claims it will have 5,000 workers across both plants when they both eventually open. The first one will open next year, the other plant on pause right now. We reached out to Blue Oval SK HR Director Neva Burke, declined to answer WDRB's specific questions about this unionization effort. Burke would only say, "We want to maintain a direct relationship with our employees." We've reached out to Beshear's office for comment on this effort to unionize, and we're still waiting to hear back.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Well, Beshear suddenly has nothing to say on the topic, right? He's dragging his feet answering, of course, and there's good reason why. And they kind of hit upon it where they said that priorly, he'd said it wouldn't be unionized. In fact, during those UAW strikes, maybe you remember them, big strikes that took place here recently at GM and Ford and, was it Stellantis or whatever? They one of the claims, one of the dragons. So right away when they shut down, Ford and all the auto manufacturers gave in pretty much to their desire, to the UAW's demands of increased payment. They said, okay, fine, we'll pay you more, whatever. But one of the things that the UAW demanded was that the electric vehicle manufacturers, that when Ford, and when this case Ford, expands into things like battery manufacturing, electric vehicle manufacturing, the UAW wanted to guarantee that those individuals would be also a part of their union. And Ford was like, no, we can't do that. There's a specific reason why they can't do that. There's a reason why Beshear's now been clammed up. And that is because in the world of electric vehicles, Ford, GM, American auto manufacturers are trying to catch up with another American auto manufacturer, Tesla, who's been in the realm for quite some time, as well as other foreign manufacturers of electric vehicles that have been ahead of these individuals. So they say if we're going to compete with them, we can't be unionized because the electric vehicle markets, the pricing, the cost, the pay, the situation has been built on non-unionized places. Take Tesla for an example, the world's leader in electric vehicle manufacturing. In fact, Tesla, I do believe that Tesla was the single largest selling model car in the world last year. One of their Tesla models, I think their baseline Model Y or whatever. The highest selling model vehicle in the world. Right? So you think, well, that's a big electric market. But the problem is that, one, it's compared to all the other electric vehicles, it's way outspending them. Two, of course, we've talked about this on the show, that in a lot of situations, it's unrealistic for a person to buy an electric vehicle. And if they do purchase an electric vehicle, it's got to be a second car almost. And also they have to be in situations where they would be saving money as well. And we've dug into all this, and it really doesn't need me to belay the points that I've already gone through on the show before. But the point is that when it comes to electric vehicle manufacturing, though, Tesla's got it down. They do manufacture their batteries here in America at their gigawatt factory. I do believe in Nevada is where they manufacture their batteries. And so they're not going to be hit by tariffs or anything else like that. And so in order for Ford and GM to compete, they can't have their electric vehicle plants unionized. Now, the Biden administration did attempt to fix this. They tried to get force Tesla to unionize. In fact, as recently as October of this year, we had a court ruling out of the federal courts against in Elon Musk's favor, but what it dealt with was the U.S. government labor board came after Musk in 2021 over a tweet he made in 2018 that basically made the comment and said, look, when companies unionize, they end up having to fire people. They end up having to lay them off. They end up having to get rid of them because they can't afford to compete anymore. And they said that tweet was anti-union and it was against the law for Musk to make those comments because it was discouraging organized labor at his own Tesla factories. Well, just recently in October, we got a ruling out of the federal courts that the federal labor board went too far in ruling against Musk, telling him he had to delete that and he couldn't say that. They said, you're violating his First Amendment rights, of course. But the Biden administration, that was their ploy. That was pretty much what had to be their promise to the auto manufacturers in order to get the boycotts, the strikes to be over. And I'm sure Kamala Harris promised to continue that work to make Tesla become unionized, because if Tesla doesn't become unionized, GM and Ford cannot compete. They literally make less. This is something people don't understand, that Tesla, on top of being a number one selling car brand, also has incredible margins on their vehicles. They make more money per vehicle than any other auto manufacturer by percentage. While Ford and GM may make more profits overall, I believe, the problem is that, well, they make a less percentage, and they really can't afford to shave much off. And it means their vehicles have become more expensive as well. As a result of these union contracts, as a result of driving up the cost of these vehicles, causing a lag in demand, Ford and GM have announced that they're laying off people. Now, you see the left trying to claim that these layoffs are in anticipation of Donald Trump's tariffs, that for some reason these companies are trying to stock up with overseas parts before tariffs come in and increase the cost. So therefore, they're firing employees so they can afford to stock up parts. I don't think that's it at all. I think they're suddenly announcing all these layoffs because they're holding off till after the election, because they're trying to not tank Kamala Harris and Biden's opportunities, depending on who was running at the time. But they were holding off till after the election because they didn't want Trump to win. Why? Because Trump has pledged to stop these billions of dollars of handouts. I mean, if you take the electric vehicle battery plant that WDRB here that we're talking about, that the unionization is talking about, the federal government gave Ford right around $3.5 billion to build those factories. And the state government gave them $410 million to build those factories. So that's $4 billion they've gotten from the taxpayer to build those factories. But if that money gets cut off, if they're no longer getting those handouts, well, they're left with half-finished buildings or an industry that they made, quote-unquote, great strides into that they won't pick up, because even they are admitting that the electric vehicle demand is slacking off. Meanwhile, they've made all this money. The federal government put all this money into it, and that demand's going to further slack off with Trump in office because they're not going to push these billions of dollars in subsidies and handouts to these companies in order to push forward this electric vehicle agenda. They're just not going to do it. Trump has pledged to end it. Now, the other interesting problem that these unions have brought on, and anybody who's watching the strikes at the time, watching the deals they were making, could have told you that this would have resulted in people losing jobs, and it has. As evidence that it's because of the strike and not Trump's tariffs, I mean, we can look at like Toyota, and I do not believe, I could be mistaken, but based upon, just doing headline searches across the country, Toyota isn't doing like massive thousands of employees at a time layoffs, not like GM and Ford. So if it was tariff concerns, you would think foreign auto manufacturers would be concerned about it even more so than Ford or GM, domestic auto manufacturers. Now, of course, the dirty little secret is that, Toyota, Nissan, some of these other companies make just as many vehicles in America as these domestic auto manufacturers, but they are foreign owned, of course. And so clearly it has a lot to do with these contracts that were negotiated out. Now, what would be nice is if you could just tell, if this company could just come in and tell people, look, you guys are unionizing and demanding this more pay. This is going to result in us having to lay off people. People lose their jobs over this, and it could be you. But they're actually not allowed to be honest and say that. You notice when we listen to that news story that Ford didn't have much of a response other than we'd like to maintain personal contact with our employees, basically saying we don't like unions, but they can't say that. See what Musk was getting in trouble for that has stretched on now for 3 years that the federal government just overturned, a tweet from 2018, was he said something slightly negative about workers and unions. And so companies aren't allowed to say, they're literally forbidden from saying the honest truth. That if you come in and you try to negotiate for higher pay than what we're paying you now, and 40% higher pay, that's what they were asking for, 40, 50% raises, then you're going to end up running into problems. We're going to have to fire people, lay people off, and we won't be competitive into the market. They're not allowed to say that. And as evidence of just how high these costs get and why they can't compete as well. So the UAW right now workers at other Ford plants start at $26.32 an hour. Then after 3 years, they're jumping to $42 an hour. Meanwhile, you look at Ford's vehicle battery plant, and those jobs are starting out at $21, $22 an hour. In fact, Tesla does generally pay more like a little bit higher than that. They'll pay like what I saw here, $25 to $36 an hour for their production workers, depending on exactly what they're doing, $25 to $36 an hour. So it's competitive with UAW as far as that goes. They start out close to the same. They don't end quite as high at that $42 an hour, but it's definitely comparable. So why is Tesla so much more profitable than Ford and GM? Well, quite frankly, it's not just unionizing costs. Union workers get paid more. That's not exactly always true. What it is that union workers are harder to fire. You can't trim the fat. It costs you more when you have to make decisions about what's best for the business. And the number one demand of business people running businesses is to ensure you make a profit. If you don't make a profit, you can't help anybody. You can't employ people. You can't keep them on board. And so you can't trim that fat. Unions make it more difficult. You have to pay people to lay them off. It ends up getting really tight, really tight. And that's why I believe that if that Ford battery plant ends up unionizing, it will be the death nail in the coffin that is that electric vehicle business. Bashir knows that. He hasn't said anything. So the question will be, and I mentioned this in my beginning, how does this affect his future? Because obviously Bashir wants to run for president in 2028. It's the only opportunity he has left on his docket. I mean, some people have talked about him running for Senate in 2026. I don't think Bashir could win that. I could be mistaken, but Kentucky has been voting red nationally for a much longer time than it's been voting red at the state level, at the state house, state senate, and governor level. We've been voting red pretty much since, the 80s, 90s, for our federal senate. Also, he's not quite an incumbent. He'd be coming into a new position, a new role. The question would be, how would he vote? Would he go along with the leftists, or would he vote more like a Republican? And he'd have to make that claim. A claim I think that's a little more difficult for him to make, especially after he went out there and was campaigning so heavily for Kamala Harris. So that really just leaves him the opportunity to run for president. Honestly, that's probably the safest thing for him to do. Because if he runs for the Senate in 2026 and loses, his political career is pretty much done. He's non-existent. He's not particularly important. And for him to gear up and then try to run for president in 2028, after losing in 2026, he would have that stench of being a loser. He would have wasted people's money in a Senate race. And it would be also clear he wouldn't be able to sell the idea that he could somehow win over these red states. Because, see, that's the reason. That would be the selling point to the Democrat establishment when it comes to somebody like Beshear, is that I can bring up, not only can I win some of the blue law states that we lost, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, because I'm a, more of that classic Southern Bill Clinton-esque seeming, not natural rhetoric, but seeming type Democrat. But his other pitch would be, maybe I can bring Kentucky into play. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but, 6 electoral votes. That's 6 electoral votes it can open up new paths for victory for the Democrats. So that could be his pitch to him. But if he loses in a Senate race in his home state in 2026, well then, of course, that doesn't look too good now, does it? It makes it pretty clear. No, he can't. Kentucky wouldn't be in play. They'd still vote red. Nationally, it's just a weird thing that happens at the state level in off-year elections. So that leaves Beshear the opportunity to run for president. Also, it's his best opportunity at a future, not just because if he loses, he can still become a vice presidential nominee. He can still become a cabinet position if he runs strong at all during the primaries. So that's his opportunity into the future. But what can get hung around his neck would be if this electric vehicle battery plant fails. But at the same time, he can't come out against the unions. That will hurt him in presidential primaries. He's truly in a political pickle. Because if he speaks out against the unions, boom, political future done. And then if this plant doesn't come together because of this unionization, guess what? I think it folds up shop. I don't think it's very successful. I mean, we've all heard how Brady Industries, the steel situation, is $12 million of taxpayer funds that got hung around Bevin's neck that people still talk about. Now imagine $410 million. Almost 20 times the amount of money. 20 times the amount of money. More than that, sorry. That'd be 30 times the amount of money. More than that. Almost 40 times the amount of money as Bevin lost with Brady Industries. Yeah, that's going to get hung around your neck and you'll be attacked for that as wasteful and awful, and it'll be a huge problem for you. And so, with that being stated, I think Beshear's in an iffy situation here. Moving on from that, Damon Thayer says that the GOP should have done more on Amendment 2, should have engaged more. Well, I agree with you, Damon Thayer, I do, but the question is where were you, I don't know, like 3, 4, 5 months ago? I mean, you have influence within the Republican Party establishment. Take, for an example, Vanessa Grossel's race. You were able to direct GOPAC funding into that race to get a Democrat that threw an R next to her name elected by a couple hundred votes. Something that, I kind of called. I was looking at the data, and I said, yeah, that should fall actually in her direction because they're dumping enough money in, and Sherilyn Stevenson, of course, was throwing up a bit of a fight, but money gets it done. Hundreds of thousands of dollars can compete. So, Damon Thayer, you're able to direct that, but you didn't get involved in any kind of influencing the GOP to get involved in the Second Amendment fight and fight over Amendment 2, the school choice fight. And you didn't bother trying to speak out on it really heavily at the time. In fact, nobody did within the GOP establishment, at all. At all. There was no great push on it. In fact, the KREF tried to stop parties from getting involved, and it was the Jessamine County Party and the Hardin County Party and the Boone County Party, led by true conservatives, that had to sue in courts in order to allow them to spend money on the school choice amendment question. That wasn't something that the state GOP bothered to get involved with. So why is he bringing this up now? Well, Damon Thayer, for those of you who don't know, is leaving as senator. He has, a few weeks left as senator. And then he's down. He's out. Matt Nunn is taking over that seat. He stepped down. Now, you may wonder why he stepped down. He's asked pretty directly on KET about that by Renee Shaw. And when asked, he responded that his political career was not done. So it's clear he was gearing up. He's gearing up to run for something else. Some people may think governor here in a few years. Some people may think senator. I personally think he's taking off a little bit of time to go make some money getting sports betting passed in another state, make big lobbying dollars on that. And meanwhile, he's going to come back here to Kentucky. And in 2 years, when Andy Barr tries for that Senate seat in 2026, I believe Damon Thayer is going to run for Congress. I could be mistaken. That's just my personal thought. Not everybody agrees with me on that. But I think that's his opportunity there. There's, I think, a lot less competition for that congressional spot that Damon Thayer will have to contend with compared to the Senate spot. Obviously, a lot more competition. The governor's election, a lot more competition. But that congressional election, that might be a good opportunity for him. Is it a step up or not? I mean, that's been the debate. When I brought it up to some of my other political, people who pay attention, asking, hey, well, you think Damon Thayer will run for Congress here? They've said, well, it's kind of a step down a bit to go from majority leader to just a regular congressman. I mean, it's a step up in pay, obviously, step up in prestige, but in actual influence and getting things done, it's a huge step down. It's funny how that works. And so, that could be the case, but I think he may be gearing up for it. But the reason why he's now coming out and saying this, of course, is because there is a lot of big donors that love school choice. And they love school choice not necessarily because it lines their pockets. It really doesn't. They're not particularly making money off of it. They love school choice because, one, they recognize that shaping our children's futures across the country as a whole is incredibly important. And the best way to get through, they're going to have to go to these schools anyways, and you love for people to homeschool and everything else. But if you don't want kids to come out as liberal crazies who can't think at all, perhaps empowering parents with school choice might be the best thing we could do to get them out of the government indoctrination facilities. And they care about this, obviously, because they care about, one, their own beliefs and being able to hold them. Two, because they are people who employ individuals, and they recognize that if our workforce is a bunch of crazy liberals that believe the world needs to be handed to them, it's harder to get the job done. And so they care about it for that reason as well. It's a little bit, it's one of the few things that large, big donors in the Republican Party view as a big picture item. And that includes people like the Koch brothers and Jeff Yass and a few others. Now, Yass, who I just mentioned, a billionaire out of Pennsylvania, he's a favorite donor too. Big donor to Rand Paul as well. He also is a big funder of, I believe, Make Liberty Win, which is a door-knocking group that jutted off from Ron Paul's youth. So obviously, Yass is a big Paul fan. As far as that goes, Rand Paul, Ron Paul fan. And he was a big donor into the school choice fight here. And I'm sure Damon Thayer is hoping to attract in some of these big donors. I mean, obviously, he'll bring in some donors from the horse tracks, but probably not as much as he would for, like, governor, if he tries to do that, if he's going to run for governor versus Congress. Because for those horse parks, I mean, keep in mind, they're not donors for altruistic reasons all the time. Most of the time, especially if a business is donating, it's because they want to help their bottom line. And for the horse tracks, they need people who have influence over the regulations that affect their bottom line. That's at the state level. So a congressman really doesn't do as much to affect that. So he'll bring in some money, but it'll be harder. So that means he'll need the backing of some other donors that do dabble in the federal side of things, and he's got to make some overtures to them. And saying and blaming the GOP and pointing at the establishment, and he's trying to do this thing where he separates himself off from the establishment, because history on Thayer is he used to be kind of viewed as a little bit more of a liberty, not as much establishment Republican senator, and he just has shifted over time. Maybe he never believed it, but he certainly has shifted over time, and maybe he's trying to make that shift back because he knows he's got a closed primary he's going to have to compete in. And that's why we got to be careful as we watch people as they're running for office. Look at what they voted on, what they've done, what their behaviors, and how they affect things too. Because, and we see this at the federal level all the time, local levels, they'll say the right thing now, but when rubber met road and it came time for actions, they didn't do anything to make a difference on the subject. And you say, like, you're literally talking about yourself. Like when you're complaining about, oh, they didn't do enough. You are those people. You didn't do enough. But I guess if you jump on the side of those who are complaining, you can play it off. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. A little bit shorter of an episode today, right around 30 minutes or so. But we will be back here on Monday. I hope you have a great rest of your day.